if we're switching gears then, you mentioned communication there with your partner. So one thing I'd love to dive into, in terms of relationships, what have you found to be the most effective tool or effective approach to conflict resolution?
Okay. Well, I think the best thing to do is you have a conflict to leave each other and go into a different room and think about what you may have brought to the conversation. But now I have these 4 questions, which are really helpful because sometimes it's difficult to look at yourself and see what you've done, if you've brought anything. And so that is helpful if you're already in the conflict, right? If you're already in the conflict, and then you have to go, then you have to go back with, if you can't go back into the communication from a place of trying to understand what went on and make things peaceful again, then you're not ready to go back into the situation. So there's no sense walking back in and still trying to make your point. You've already done that. It didn't work. So that's not going to work. So then you go back again and you sit. And I'll give you another example of something that happened last night. Okay, so we were going to have a nice evening together. We had a fireplace. We had music, usually like from the 30s and the 20s. We like that old music. And we're planning on maybe going, we're going to go to England, actually. We're going to go to England. I can't tell you any more about that because I don't think it's public, but we're going to go there. And then afterwards, my daughter said, oh, well, she'd like to also take another trip somewhere else for about 5 days after that with us, which is a very nice thing that she's invited us. But I have an appointment with a nephrologist the beginning of December, and it wouldn't get in the way of that, but it would get in the way of the blood test that I have to have 2 weeks before that. And the way it was organized, we were going to come back and it was going to give me that 2 weeks and I had it all settled. But then right before we had this meeting, this date that we were having last night, he told me that, my husband told me that we were going to possibly extend our trip for 5 days. And that brought up the fact that I'd had cancer, that it brought up that whole past, because I was going to have to figure out how to have a blood test. And so I came out into the living room and I looked at the fire and I told him that I was trying to give whatever I was troubled with to God. And he listened. He was kind of impatient, you know, he wanted me to move on and just be present. But I said that I was having some trouble being present, that there was something on my mind, but I wasn't quite sure what was on my mind. I had a problem with the decision to extend the trip. And I knew it had something to do with that I had a nephrology appointment. And then that brought up, oh, I have another CT scan that has to be scheduled. Is that going to be also in trouble when in January we go on a trip? So all of a sudden, this whole complex of trouble came up. But I knew it. So I at least told him, I said, I'm thinking about these things and I don't know what to do about them. Mm-hmm. So I admitted my discomfort. And after not a very long time, he started to talk to me about, and he said, let's separate these two things. One is a blood test and one is a CT scan, and they're at different times. We'll just separate those two out. So we simplified it. And then we talked about the nephrology. Well, that's a phone call because nobody goes to the doctor anymore until, you know, unless they have to. So that's, I can do that anywhere. But the blood test, I have to have that done. He said, oh, well, we could do that in England. We could find a place. I said, no, I don't want to do that. We were simplifying the conversation. And with my attention turning to God and asking God for help, that this is too much for me. I often pray for courage and strength. Those are the things I seem to need in order to go through stressful situations. Like when my husband was in the hospital, before I went into the hospital, I actually called a friend and we spoke, and I said that I needed to ask God for courage and strength, and told her, which seems to help because of the divinity in each of us. You can speak to another person and find some divine help. So as long as this person knows how to listen, if this person is willing to listen, then you can tell them what's on your mind. And that communication somehow with another person, with your attention to God, yourself and another person, there's something about that, and maybe I'll learn more about what that is, but it is golden. It really sets you up for a better communication. So that's what happened last night. It was like, oh, okay, we'll simplify this. It's only a blood test. It's not going to get in the way of the nephrology appointment. The blood test can be, maybe the blood test can be done before we even leave for England. Why does it only have to be 2 weeks before the appointment? Maybe it can be 3 weeks before the appointment. I don't know all of this stuff. So looking at options, looking at more options, then gave me room, and I was able to let it go. And then the evening went on. So that's not exactly a dispute between two people, but that kind of tension, if I wasn't communicating with Jordan, he wouldn't know what happened. Here we had agreed that we would come together and spend an evening together, and now I was being standoffish. Like so it could have really gone in a direction that would have just made the whole evening end at that point.